I went to the cubicle and I sat down and I cried. Being the middle child, I kind of never got my voice heard. I was like invisible. Screw everybody else. Screw what I'm being told.
My wife always tell me the same thing. You're very good in your content, but you are very boring.
Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time. None of you people can tell me to stop.
So with us today on our episode of Life Insider Show, Speak for Impact and Influence, I am having here with me a guest who is an award-winning coach and master coach trainer, Lin Tan, or also known as Lin. Lin is the youngest master certified coach, which is the highest official coach certification one can achieve, representing the top 3% worldwide. Now, to give some of you a bit of context, if you know me and the work that I'm doing, I am right now on my path towards PCC, which is one level below Lin in her accreditation as one of the top coaches in ICF. Lin has worked with hundreds of individuals and organizations, clocking over 4,000 hours of coaching experiences, turning them into extraordinary leaders and coaches. She has been recognized for her work. Lin was awarded the Top 101 Global Coaching Leader Award in 2020 by the World HRD Congress and a finalist of the Young Leader Award by the International Coaching Federation for her contribution to the profession. She has also been featured on Channels News Asia and Channel 8 and published a best-selling book on coaching. Today, Lin champions professional coaches and coaching leaders through her coach training school, Collective Change Institute, and is also a contributor for the Forbes Coaches Council. She also served as president last year on the board of the International Coaching Federation Singapore chapter. So with all that said, welcome to the show, Lin. How are you doing today, Lin?
Hello. Hi, KarFei. Hi, guys. Nice to be here. I'm excited.
Awesome.
And congrats. It's so lovely to hear that you are working towards your professional coach credential.
Yes. So I should be getting my PCC by this year, going through all this mentor coaching and stuff.
Great.
So yeah, so I'm finally, getting my accreditation in that sense. But that's exciting. But, I just want to say thank you so much, Lin, for being here. You are busy. I know, like you're doing a lot of things. You're training thousands of coaches and 4,000 hours of coaching. That is just amazing, right? Like, I really want to kind of pick your brain on how you do what you do and how you get to where you are today. But that said, Lin, why don't you give a bit of a glimpse of your background and what you do right now, or what are you up to these days in your life and in your career?
What am I up to these days? I'm waiting for my third child to come out anytime now. Hopefully not now during the show. That would be scary. But yeah, so other than waddling around, I have two other younger girls. So there's a lot of time that I spend at home, but I work from home. I mean, that's the great thing about running a business and coaching, clients. Primarily, I love training coaches. That is my top secret that I share all the time. I love it more than coaching itself, but I still coach to keep my feet on the ground. The kind of coaching that I do primarily would be leadership coaching. So I'm engaged by organizations to go in and turn leaders around, who are getting, not so good feedback from their team, or turn teams around.
Nice.
So that's the exciting stuff. So apart from leadership coaching and training coaches, I run Collective Change Institute, and actually that's what I love to do as well, business, like the business of creating platforms that can change and transform people's lives.
Wow, that's amazing. And not just coaching, but you're coaching coaches who are probably out there coaching, hundreds and thousands of people. So your impact is crazy, right? Like your ability to be able to impact these lives and how you turn teams around and how they become better leaders in organizations. I think that is much needed, right? I mean, in workplaces, we always talk about making work a better place and so on. And I also personally believe that the most important thing we need to do is actually to make workplaces a better workplace, right? Because we spend 65% of our waking hours in the workplace. We might as well spend some time making workplace a better place. Well, that's awesome. So speaking about coaching, right? What gets you started? Like Lin, what gets you started in coaching, and what gets you to where you are today?
Wow, that's like going back how many years ago, KarFei? 2003.
Wow.
So I was like in this quarter life crisis. I had this huge Okay, so I remember when I was doing my internship, I was in the fashion design field. And there was one evening I was called in to do overtime. And it was like 6 o'clock p.m. Oh, sorry, Lynn, you have to do overtime today. I went to the cubicle and I sat down and I cried. And I didn't know why I was crying at that time. I just felt so miserable. So, looking back, I was really upset because I was wondering, is this what life is? Is this what working life is? It's miserable, it's not fun, it's not inspiring. And I think that got me to start to question, is this my trajectory for the next 50, 60 years? So that's kind of when I think I was a bit more present to like a search, like a deeper search as to what's going to be more meaningful, what's fulfilling in life. So that kind of kick-started it. And I think the turning point came when I wanted to set up my own fashion business and I procrastinated for 6 months. It was just somehow I just couldn't get anything done. And that was when I realized, okay, maybe something is really wrong with me. What's going on? So that was when I was introduced a coach. So I actually started as a coachee first.
Yeah.
And I worked with a professional coach. And I tell you, the experience was it just turned my head like 360 degrees. And it's not like the coach kind of telling me and brainwashing me, Lynn, you can do it, or Lynn, you have all this potential. But in short, it was a conversation that really awakened me to my truths, both in terms of the illusions that I was living in, like my fears, like my self-doubt. And it got me it really hit me in terms of, okay, if I want to live a life that's meaningful, I got to take charge of it. Okay, so the whole experience was life-changing to say the least. But of course, there's work to do after the coaching. The perspectives can be, you can get those paradigm shifting perspectives, but there's a lot of work to be done, which happened after that. So it was through, of course, actions and plans and making things happen. I set up my business, and that really proved to me that actually coaching is sustainable, right? Which is difficult to find in a lot of other interventions, including getting advice from your friends, getting advice from your mentors, okay? So that was when I was totally convinced that coaching works. And as somebody who's always wanted to help people so desperately almost at that time, I thought, this is it. This is the one thing I want to start to get really good at. So that's what started the coaching career.
Well, then in that case, I mean, you started your business in the fashion industry, right? Fashion design industry. And then you kind of, and you started it, you kind of get it going, and then you move into coaching. How do you decide to make that shift? Because obviously both of them are to a certain extent very different, right? So
Yeah.
how do you bring up the courage to make that shift?
Oh, it was actually very easy, because I think setting up the fashion business is like a bucket list. Okay. So once it was done and I was getting sales in and it became proof that I can actually do something, it was one thing that added to my confidence, that proved to me that I can make something happen, which is like rare in my first 20 years actually, because I suffered very bad self-esteem. That was when I decided, okay, I've done it, okay, check off the bucket list, but what's really meaningful for me? Coaching. Wow. So going with the heart and going with what made sense actually made it easy.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned both at the same time, which is going with the heart and choosing what makes sense. So it's the brain and the heart that it's a line that gets you to where you are today. Now then the big question is, right? I mean, I know this is not part of speaking and so on, but I think this will help people, right? Is how do you align both of them? How do you align your brain and your heart in order for you to know that, okay, this is what I want to do, I'm going to go do it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question and a good observation there. I think we tend to rely on one main faculty. Those of us who think too much, we overthink things, right? So even though we feel for something, we go, oh, does it make sense? Can it make money? Will it be accepted? And then we let that stop ourselves. Then you have another group of people who go with the heart, like they just feel, but they don't use like strategy to plot like what's the best and the fastest way to get there. So I do think it takes getting to know yourself. like we must swing to the extremes to realize that, hey, if I listen too much to my head, this is what overthinking feels like. And this tends to be the repercussions. Listening too much to my heart, but not thinking, this is the repercussions. And then, we slowly calibrate. And it's a self-discovery process. It's not something that you suddenly wake up to one day at, 25 years old.
Well, in that case, if I ask you, right, Lynn, if I ask you, if someone really comes to you right now and really ask you, like, how do I really make sure that my what I'm thinking, what my mind is thinking about, and how my heart is feeling right now, how do I align both of them? What would you say would be the 1, 2, 3 kind of like steps to at least help them to be aligned?
Wow. Actually, that's where coaching comes in.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I often teach my coaches is you cannot just take a presenting statement and take it as the client's truth or the person's truth. So whether you're working with a client or a friend, okay, they're gonna take a gulp of their beer and they're gonna open up and say, hey, KarFei, this is what's on my mind. And most of the time we just jump at that. Right? Whether we are a manager, a leader, a coach, a speaker, whoever, right? We kind of take it as at face value. But that's where the magic of coaching comes in. That's where you hear, okay, this is maybe what you're thinking of, but let's go deeper. Because actually human beings are like onions. We behave in layers. And our truth is hidden below several layers, which takes some unpacking to get there. And when they have reached that point, the alignment will come. So it's kind of like, what is it that caused such a huge paradigm shift in my coaching experience? Okay, let me share with you very briefly the story. I knew at the surface, like, the presenting issue, I have a procrastination problem, as with every other human being on earth, right? Okay, but why is it I couldn't get past it myself? So that was when the coach had a conversation with me to really dig deep. And I realized that actually, hey, I had a philosophy that sounded like this: if I'm going to fail, why should I even start? Okay, and we dug even deeper, and I realized it came from being the middle child. I kind of never got my voice heard, so it was always my parents would go with what my sister wanted, what my younger brother wanted, but I was like invisible. So nothing I said in a way mattered. So it's like everything I touched, what was the point? It was a lot of jadedness. Okay, so it's like when you go that deep and you kind of see how your whole life makes sense from that philosophical point of view, you go, oh, why would I want to live that way anymore? And then that's where that impetus comes to go, you know what? No, I want better for myself. So it has to reach a certain level for the alignment to happen.
Right. So what you're saying, Lynn, is that for alignment to happen between your head and your heart, I mean, I talk about this as well in some of my coaching, right? The 3H, right? The head, the heart, and the hand, right? The doing piece, right? The hand. So in order to be able to align the head and the heart, what really matters is really dig deeper below the surface, reasons or excuses that we give to ourselves in everything that we do. It could be procrastination, it could be fear of failure, it could be fear of looking for a new job, making a career shift, and so on and so forth. So that's essentially the most important thing to begin with. Now, and I find that interesting, and I really want to dig deeper because I
because you're a coach.
Yeah, and no. I mean, and I also kind of find out about you and so on. And one of your tagline is that you kind of pride yourself in helping to turn ordinary people into extraordinary coaches, right? Now, in that aspect, what makes a person extraordinary? I mean, maybe we could look into more generic example like human or people in general, or if you want to give specific examples in corporations and so on, feel free to do that. But I'm really curious about, in your coaching experience, 4,000 hours of coaching experience, you have coached thousands and thousands of people. What makes a person extraordinary?
That is very unique to each person. So I would start off saying that everybody has that seed of extraordinariness in them, but it is buried under a lot of conditioning, right? So history, conditioning, what our parents told us, what society told us, going with peer pressure, we lose ourselves along the way to try to fit in and to try to find, to try to make life work. And if you look at it growing up, while we might have sensed that this isn't really the way to live, we don't have any other way, because how many of us are really truly lucky to have a wake-up call from a mentor or a parent or a teacher or anybody at all, or maybe even a life-changing like incident or accident, right? So if we don't have that, we just kind of plod along the way and we take our cues from external. So we lose ourselves in that. But actually, if we are able to start to turn the attention inward and follow the self-discovery process, empower sort of the question of who am I and how do I want to live my life?
Wow.
Screw everybody else, screw what I'm being told. But if I really had that, that power in my hands, what's the kind of life I want to live? What's the kind of person I want to be? If I could turn everything around with no repercussions, maybe we start there. Then that is where you begin to acknowledge that seed that exists. So over the years, when I work with a lot of clients, there are a couple of ingredients that help them bring out that extraordinariness. Okay, courage to pursue what they actually want against what they think other people would think about them. All right, courage to go against themselves. Years of conditioning, years of beliefs and limiting beliefs that they want to take that shot. Like, if we talk about dating, like, oh, I like that girl. I don't have self-confidence, but I'm going to do it anyway. Those kind of acts of courage are a huge factor in bringing out, some, your sort of extraordinary essence. Self-love, putting yourself first, wanting to know about yourself, putting importance on yourself, and stop giving yourself away to other people's needs, obligations. Yeah, so all these sort of human, I don't know what you call these, like, they're not traits, they're like, they have a word for it.
Values.
Yes, all these values that have been passed on for like eons, right? Like all these wise men preach these things. Yeah, there is some element of truth to it.
Well, I guess in that sense, right, from what you just said, what would really make someone, or at least help someone to turn into bringing out that seed of, like you said, right, that seed of extraordinariness, right? It's really about asking a few questions, right? Number one, who do I want to become, right? Like screw all the conditioning, screw the world, screw all the repercussions. Let's sit with ourselves inwards and ask, who do I want to become, right? And if I can choose, if I have all the power in the world, how do I want to live my life, right? And these two key questions, it's essentially helps you to bring out those things that they deeply wanted but are afraid to pursue. And now when they bring it out, then what's necessary is those courage, the confidence, the self-love to be able to say, you know what? I am going to do it. I want to do it. I choose to do it. I choose to do this. I choose to change my career, right? That helps them to really bring this extraordinariness into the surface so that they can pursue that goals. Just like your own story, like Lynn, like knowing that, starting the business is kind of like a bit of a conditioning thing, right? I mean, it's like checking off the bucket list. But when you realize that, you know what, if I can start a business, that means I can also do other things. That means I can also pursue anything I want. And that for you, it's having the courage to then to pursue coaching and eventually gets you to where you are today. Now, let's go one step deeper into this, right? Like Lynn, one of the things that you mentioned just now is, before this, you say that you suffered also from, low self-esteem, self-confidence issues, and so on and so forth. Now, my question then is, how do you get out of it? Like, how do you build that self-confidence? How do you kind of go out there and really kind of start your business, or even pivoting from, something that you're comfortable with, which is a fashion business, into coaching, which is totally new, which probably requires you to speak, to talk, to coach, and all these things. How do you build that self-confidence?
That takes years. So what we will, it takes years to unravel, to be very frank, because it's a two-way process. On one hand, it's easy to say, well, you just need to take a first step. All right, you need to take small steps. You need to start with asking yourself those questions that you pointed out and identifying like little steps to get there. Yes, but we also cannot ignore the fact that for every effort put into changing our trajectory, there are counter efforts as well. Okay, so this is where we need to get real with ourselves and do that kind of inner work to look at what is stopping us. What are the fears? What are the limiting beliefs? What are the ghosts from the past? You know, where am I not listening to myself? Like the not so nice things about how we set ourselves up to fail, how we sabotage ourselves, like all that is equally important in the entire process, which is why I'm not a huge fan of like positive thinking. Okay, you cannot think, you cannot kind of think yourself into success, because in my line of work as a coach, I help people find out their truths.
Yeah.
And it can get quite ugly sometimes because they really have to face themselves. Yeah, so there is that reflection process and that ownership process. Okay, so maybe I can give you an example. You know, you're a young dad in many sense of the word. I think both in terms of age and the age of your child. You know, I struggled for, frankly, the first few years since my first child. Okay, and it was actually only this year. So my first child was in 2016. Now it's really 2021. Right? It was only recently this year, with the help of somebody else, like a coach, who asked me a question: what's gonna be different about your pregnancy this time? And if you can find that difference, it's going to create a shift in your whole family. Okay. Wow. So I was stuck at that question for a few days. I could not find the answer. And then one day it just hit me. I looked at all the years, the last few years, ever since the moment I found out I was pregnant with my first child. And I realized that because I wasn't expecting it, it set me straight away into a victim mindset. I was a victim of pregnancy, even though my husband and I were sort of planning one day to get a kid. Like, we didn't expect it to be so soon, right? And then the rest of the pregnancy and everything, there were some complications, etc. So the whole journey of motherhood and parenting was just trauma. And so I was locked in a victim position, and I wasn't even very clear about that. Like, I felt that as a coach, I had the self-awareness, I got the help to keep up, you know, adapting and evolving as a mother, as a new mother, etc. But at the back, there was still that identity that, oh God, I'm a victim to motherhood. And it showed up in my behaviors towards my husband, towards my children. I was very impatient. I would lose my temper and everything, even though I try to be, parent consciously. These things would just kind of shoot out without an ability to control. So these are the painful things that we had to look that once you look at and you own that, okay, I'm a victim right now, and I don't want to be, because I'm hurting everybody around me. There comes that choice and that ownership to make a shift, which does take effort. So then there comes, okay, the steps, the little baby steps, the self-forgiveness, the little wins. But before getting to that truth, it's very difficult to just try to change reality step by step without dealing with yourself.
Right. So essentially what you're saying is two things, right? Reflection and ownership, right? And it is very easy for us to just talk about, okay, let's just reflect on some of the things that happened. But if there is no ownership of kind of like deciding and committing to make a shift or to make a change, then to a certain extent, then the awareness or the reflection is somehow left hanging. But on the other hand, with commitment or things that you want to do, but if you don't spend the time to kind of reflect and really go inwards to really discover what are those things, the beliefs and the fear that's holding you back, then that commitment will be futile, right? Like, you won't go far. Whatever that you try to change, you will hit with kind of like 2 steps back, right? That's the key, right? Reflection and ownership. Now, then let me ask you, for you, right, Lim, I'm not too sure if you are, naturally confident with speaking to people, getting on stage, coaching people who are possibly, older than you, more experienced than you, and so on. Let's talk a little bit about speaking, about public speaking, right? Because one of the things that I realized is that, at least for me personally, I suffered from, low self-esteem, low confidence in speaking. I mean, most of the listeners who are listening and people who see me right now, they'll be like, that's impossible, KarFei. Like, you get on stage, you just kill it kind of thing. But I wasn't, right? So for you, Lynn, how do you build up that self-confidence in speaking? How do you build up that self-confidence to be able to speak so that your words have power, so that your words, it's able to shift, to transform people's way of thinking, or at least the way they perceive certain things?
Yeah. So because I started coaching when I was 20, so majority of my clients were older than me. So I had to find a way to speak such that they would listen, they would sit up, and they would be proven wrong. Because we know that there's an age biasness, right? You are too young, you have not experienced, you're not married. How can you coach me on marriage? You're not a leader, how can you, or you're not a leader of a big organization. So I had to learn that very fast. So this is writing off our very last point that we discussed. I found out that the fastest way to get somebody to sit up and listen to me was to hit them with a truth, was to have a conversation so efficient and effective in them going, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I didn't know that about myself, or I never dared to admit it to myself. Something to the effect, they will realize straight away that there is value in talking to you.
Wow, that is powerful, Lynn. So what you're saying is that no matter who you're facing, no matter who you're talking to, even if they're older, more experienced, richer, whatever than you, your job is to make them see what they don't see.
Yeah.
Like a hard through truth that they don't see.
Yeah.
And that make them reflect. And that make them want to listen to you.
Yeah. And that would be one of my tips to those of you who are interested in speaking, right? Even so in coaching, we kind of know that happens, but on stage, be somebody who goes up there and you really take that opportunity of that keynote, right? 15 minutes, half an hour, to punch them with something that would really value them in helping them awaken to their truth or awaken to their possibility or their potential. Don't just spew tips. Don't just spew things that people want to hear, right? Nowadays, there's so much free resource out there. Whatever that you're saying is going to be the same as what everybody else is saying. But where our value comes in is through your own expertise. Whatever that you do, you would understand your audience from that angle deeper than most people. And you would understand where they are not acknowledging or accepting either what's holding them back or their greatness. Okay, either or.
Wow.
And if you can shape that argument and punch them with that, that's something they're gonna leave remembering you for.
Wow, that's powerful. That's essentially, taking something and hit them so hard that it leaves them an impression.
Yeah.
Well, so I think for everyone who is listening today, this is a great takeaway, because if you want to be able to speak for impact and influence, because at the end of the day, we speak because we want to influence people, want to influence team, or we want to bring impact in the work that we do. The one of the tips that Lynn has shared today is really bring in your value and really share some hard truth to the participant, to the people who are listening, so that they want to listen to you. I think that is one important lesson that we are getting today. So Lynn, speaking essentially, probably, you've been doing it right now for a lot, right? Coaching and training, delivering sessions and so on. That is becoming natural to you. If you could, share some tips, like for you, what makes a great speaker? Like what makes you want to listen to a speaker?
Wow. Okay. I would say number one, they do what I just said. They just tell me something that would wake me up to, what's going on in me or around me or in the world. Right? Number two, that they embrace their personality. Okay. So if you are funny, if you're colorful, if you're loud, if you're, you're compassionate, like that those personality traits are attractive, number one, because number two, they're congruent with you. So people only want to listen to congruent people. They're not going to listen to people who are just there to spew something that is not theirs, or is not something that they have walked the talk before in their life. Right? So I think this will be the two things that are innate. The third thing maybe is something a little bit more learned, which is kind of stage presence, right? Walking around, gestures, facial expressions, use of the audience, use of props. I think that's really important also. And if you don't want to be so theatric, then your ability to use your voice, your tonality, or analogies and stories, the energy that you create as a speaker is so important. Actually, now that we talked about it, energy is a huge resource and ammunition that speakers need to have. The ability to manipulate their own energy and therefore the energy of the room. Because if your energy is lower than everybody put together, nobody's going to listen to you. You become a vacuum.
Yep, that is so true. Now, and now this is where the key is, right? See, there are certain traits that are learned, right? Like you mentioned, stage presence, body language, a bit of manipulation of energy. I mean, energy management, I call it, right? But on the other hand, you also mentioned the second tip just now, it's about being congruent. It's about being able to get on stage and embrace your own personality, right? Like, for example, right, I'm very open right here, right? Like my wife, that now wife, back then girlfriend, she used to come to listen to me speak in, events and speeches and so on. And she will always tell me the same thing. Your speech, you're very good in your content, but you are very boring. She was like, I was like, okay, well, tell me more, right? So she told me that, one is that my verbal, right, my tonality and stuff is very monotonous. And my speech is a lot about, facts, data, figures. I mean, a bit of story, but there's lack of humor. So what happened? She was like, maybe you should learn, to crack some jokes and all these kind of different things. And at the point, I was asking myself, is that who I am, right? And I told myself that, what, if I'm being true to myself, if I'm being authentic, if I'm being congruent, I don't need jokes. I just need to be able to deliver, the what I know, and people will listen. But the lesson I learned is that that's not the case, right? Like, you can have the greatest content in the world using your own personality, and when you get on stage, like you said, Lynn, you could be just a vacuum, right? Your energy is low, there's no jokes, there's no like changing of tonality, pitch, verbs, and all these things, and no one's going to listen to you. You won't be able to, no matter how much you know in terms of your content, right? You won't be able to deliver. Now, why am I telling this story? Is because my question to you, Lynn, is how do you balance between being aligned with your true self versus portraying or implementing those learned skills that we learn in public speaking?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, first of all, I want to say that your wife did deliver value. That's kind of telling you, right? Like the things that you don't want to hear that makes you go, oh, I think I can be better.
Yeah.
So kudos to her. I can see why you married her.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe the angle that she was presenting, it didn't resonate with you because that's not who you know yourself to be. Okay. But when we talk about congruency, it doesn't have to be necessary personality traits. I think fundamentally what's a very important place to start with is, why are you doing this? What is your purpose? If you are there to change lives, okay, like what I said earlier, if you've got 15 minutes as a keynote, what is your purpose in those 15 minutes? If I go in, I'm going to go in there and say, I want to, say something that gets people to wake up. And this is my only chance to make an impact. That's my philosophy. That's my value, right? That's my purpose. So it's the same thing. What is your purpose when you are on stage for the X number of minutes? That is what you fundamentally need to be congruent with. So even if your your style is content and data. Now, if you interlace that with, let's say, your philosophy of making a difference, then you're going to have now a more unique formula as to how the content and data that you're sharing can make a difference to these people's lives. Then it's more congruent than just spewing something you took off the internet, because you have embodied it, you have thought through it, you have processed it from your lens, from your expertise and your understanding, and that's where there is some element of value.
Right. So then there are two things I'm getting right here, right? So the first one is basically that purpose, or I would also call it the intention, right? It's like, what is your intention of being there? Like, what is your intention of speaking? And I think this is not just for everyone who's listening, right? Some of you might be thinking, Lynn, KarFei, you guys are talking about, getting on stage, speaking in front of hundreds of people. But right now, I'm even afraid to speak to my boss. I'm even afraid to speak to my team of like 3 people. How is this relevant to me? And I think these are the two things that could be relevant, right? One, it's the intention, right? Like when you get on stage or when you go and speak to your team, what is your intention? What is your purpose of doing that speech or that presentation, right? Because fundamentally, when your intention is good, when your purpose is good, coming from a place of value, that's what you're saying, right, Bilin? Coming from a place of value, like, how can I add value to this group of people? I think that helps in the first place. And second is it's about that. So the first is intention and purpose. Second, it's really about not thinking about ourselves. I think this is something that most people, especially when they speak, when they need to present and so on, it's every time that you are being selected to speak or whatever, the first thing that crosses most people's mind is, shit, what am I going to do? Shit, what are people going to say about me? Shit, what are people going to judge me and all these things? It's always about you, right? So in order for you to kind of be able to speak well, confident, and just be true to yourself, it's really about thinking from the other person's point of view. Think about what they're going to get. Think about what they're going to, learn. Think about what they're going to achieve from, listening to you for the next like 5, 10, 15 minutes or so on. I think that's the two key things that I've gotten out of what you just said, Lynn, right? So now let's go a little bit more about your coaching, Lynn. I mean, we talked a little bit about speaking. Let's go a little bit about coaching, right? The past, let's just say, I'm not too sure about you, but at least for me, the past 1.5 years, throughout the pandemic, we have probably seen a rise of coaches, consultants, trainers, and these are people who have been, running ads all over Facebook, right? I coach you to make 6 figures and all these kinds of different things. Now, Lynn, based on your experiences, if someone wants to look for a coach, right, what are the few criteria that you would, suggest or recommend for people to look at before they choose their coach?
Okay, number 1, dig deep. So don't be afraid to ask this person, give me case studies, give me your success stories. Okay, now it's not enough to just hear that. Tell me how exactly you created that transformation. Tell me how exactly you added to this process that enabled the client to get these results. All right, second step. Third step, all right, this is my situation. How are you going to help me? And you hear their approach and you hear their strategy. Now, the ones who are more experienced will be able to share something with you that resonates according to what you might be looking for. Or they will be upfront to say, actually, no, this is not where my expertise lies. Right? I have worked with ABC cases, but I don't see how that will best value add you. So they are clear about that. So yeah, it is very easy to fall into, get sort of confused with all the noise going on out there, about coaches who would, pull sort of anything from the air to say, they can do this and that. I mean, anybody can wake up the next day and call themselves a coach.
Yep.
And you being aligned with the International Coaching Federation standards, I think the pain of that.
100%.
From I'm sorry, but real coaches, okay, who go through a lot of training to be able to help a person dig deep, right? So that would be the way to challenge a coach. Yeah, those 3 things that I mentioned.
So it's really about, digging deep and really asking about the coach, just own experience first, right? Like, your training, not just training, right? But their own experience of going through different things to see whether there is a bit of that, whether if the person feels resonating with the coach. And second is asking and really understanding the case studies. And the third is to really see how the coach would approach the challenges that you have, or the person who's looking for a coach would have. So that's a three important things to look at. So for all of you who are listening, it is very important for you to not fall for all these different coaches who are, running their ads on Facebook, who are promising you, everything under the sky just to make you buy or, engage them as a coach. It's very important for all of you to pay attention that, coaches like Lynn herself, like me, we've gone through rigorous, training and certifications by ICF to be able to do what we do. So it's very important for you to do your research and ask to see whether the coach feels right for you. Now, one question, let's say go in a bit fun question, right? Lynn, you have probably coached, a lot of people, and probably people from very diverse background, probably some young chaps to some, veterans and senior in the industry and so on. Have you ever, met some people who have like extremely unrealistic goal? Like, Lynn, I know you can help. I know coaching is powerful. And then they come to you with like a super unrealistic goal, whatever that might be, right? You can share if you want, if you feel like. And how do you approach that? How do you kind of tell them that, hey, you know what, let's, take a step back and, whatever. How do you do that?
Actually, on the contrary, I would say 99% of the coachees or the clients or even the coaches that I have worked with since 2004 suffer from the opposite. They don't believe that they can reach a goal, their goals.
So
their
they play small.
They play small and they bought into it. Right. I think that 1%, the ones I can think of tend to be it's more around a financial goal. I want to run a $1 million business from nothing, like from zero, right? I suddenly want to become a millionaire entrepreneur. Okay, tell me how. So in those cases, we do need to ground the person, but we don't tell them, hey, KarFei, I don't think you can do it because you've not done it before. Right? The whole idea of them engaging a coach is because they do want to explore those possibilities. So like one of the approaches that I would then take is to just ask questions as to, okay, how do you plan to do that? Show me, tell me what's your plan, challenge the thought process. If you challenge the thought process, they're going to come to their own conclusions as to what they can really do and what they can't do. Right? Or maybe even where this whole idea of being a millionaire entrepreneur came in from. Maybe it's peer pressure. Maybe it's not actually fully aligned with their heart. They're just kind of thinking that it's what they want, but it's not really meant for them. So that's what happens when we challenge their thought process. But otherwise, no, most people don't believe that they can achieve what they want.
What do you do then? Like in that case, like if people are playing too small, how do you then tell them, hey, play big, right? Like, hey, you can do bigger things. Because somehow that also doesn't work, right? Because if someone believes that they can't go big, even if you tell them, they'll be like, no, that's impossible, right?
Yeah.
So how do you reverse that then?
Well, first of all, why are you coming to look for me then? So there is a part of you that in which that goal or that dream resonates. And even though you don't see the way right now, you actually believe a small part of yourself either deserves that or you really want that, okay, or something. So we kind of explore the why. Again, it's down to the purpose. And we start, even if it's a sliver of hope, we start there because that sliver can grow.
Right.
So as coaches, we are trained to work with what we have or what the coachee has. Whether it's any kind of resources, any talent, any dream, what do they have currently that they can tap into, and we grow that like the way that you grow a plant. So even though you don't see the plant right now, as long as you have the soil, you have a pot, you have a seed, you have water, you have something you can start with. It's just then slowly gathering the rest.
So basically what you're saying is that helping them to see the tiny little possibilities
Mm.
and grow that tiny possibilities so that it kind of grow to become bigger and it creates momentum for them to keep going, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's the key. Last question though, like Lynn, I mean, this sounds, from a coaching point of view, I mean, I've been doing coaching, you've been doing coaching. On a theoretical point of view, it makes perfect sense. But
Okay.
sometimes realistically, for some people, there will be people who are resistant. There will be people who are like, Lynn, no lah, like this, I can't, it's impossible, and so on and all these things. How would you help them to overcome that belief or that mental block?
I mean, why then? Okay, so would these people have already come to look for you? Because if they do, then they would have something to start off with, right? They won't sort of come and look for you and say,
Yes and no. I mean, I've experienced both. So I'm just wondering if you have experienced it before, right? Like they have engaged you, but throughout the coaching, you felt that this person is just resisting that change, right? Or finding ways to, resist the change.
Actually, from the get-go, we there won't be any engagement. So part of our role as a coach, and this applies to, I guess, any role that you play as a parent, as a manager, maybe less so as a speaker, but it still kind of applies. Why is this person, or why are these people sitting in front of you? All right, are they there out of choice, or are they there out of obligation? So as a coach, the initial conversation, I would be able to tell already whether they are ready. Are they ready, or are they willing to work towards something? And if you don't have those elements, you don't have growth. And if you don't have growth, there's no work to be done.
Right.
So I think that's the first thing that we need to ascertain in any role that we play. I mean, even as parents, like as a parent, sometimes we want our child to do something a certain way. The question is there openness? Is there trust? Is there listening? Is there, are they willing to try? If you don't have these basic growth ingredients, then just drop it. You're just, imposing your own agenda on somebody else.
Yeah. So essentially, what's important for anything to take place, for any positive change, no matter if you are a speaker speaking on stage of 1,000 people, no matter if you're a coach speaking one-on-one, or if you're a trainer delivering a training in like 20, 30 people, fundamentally, the willingness to change needs to be there. So I think that it's the key here for everyone who's listening, is that if you guys are looking to engage a coach, or if you guys want to make a change, it is very important for you to know that you first need to decide that you want to change and have the willingness to make a change in any aspect of your life. I think that it's the most important thing right here. So last but not least, Lynn, what is your advice for people? What is your advice for people who want to, get into coaching, who wants to embark on a journey of being a speaker, being a trainer, or being someone that impact lives? What would your top advice be?
Work on yourself. Do your own self-work, do your own inner work. That's the difference that over time people are going to see and sense and feel in you, that congruence, the inner alignment, right? You're not going to be somebody who's just spewing things, like good ideas or things off the internet, or top tips, or okay, this is how you run a business. But that you have walked the talk in changing yourself. That is where every coach needs to start off with. KarFei, I will engage you if you have proven to me that you have caused a huge change in your life. Even though you've not worked with any other coachee and that's not proven, I need to know that you've done it for yourself.
And that is the most important evidence to begin with, right?
Yeah, compared to, let's say, a coach who has worked with, 20 coaches, but what do? Give you workbooks. Okay, fill in this workbook, come back, let me look at the workbook and know that you've done your work. But there's no deeper inner work beyond that. Then it's okay, I can just download something from the internet. I don't need you, right?
That is so true. Well, I think that is so true. And I think for everyone who's listening, at the end of the day, you can go out there, pay a lot of money, get all your certifications. You can go out there and, you know, pay for this course, pay for that program. But fundamentally, what, in my opinion as well, that really makes a great coach, that will make a good speaker on stage, is their experiences of doing the work themselves, doing the inner work for themselves, and bring out that experiences to be able to use it with other people, you know, on stage or one-on-one in coaching and so on.
That's where the heart comes out. The heart and the essence of a person comes out when they have walked that journey and they're there committed to you too.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. That is a great advice, Lynn. Now, last but not least, if our listeners want to, you know, check out what you do, Lynn, or kind of just follow you or find out more about you, where should they go?
You can, I'm very active on Instagram, so you can look for me, LIN_T. Otherwise, if you are, well, I put a lot of time in my business, actually. I don't really build my own brand, so you can go to www.collective change institute, and that's kind of where you'll find all the coaching work that I do. So these are the two platforms you can find me at.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lynn. Well, Lynn, last but not least, you know, I just really want to say thank you for making time for this. And I think a lot of people has, you know, gotten a lot of like real insights and nuggets, not just like how to become a good coach, right? Or how to speak better. But I think, Lynn, your true essence and your inner work is shown in this episode of this podcast, where you really talk about your own self-transformation, your own journey that gets you to where you are today. And I think our listeners will get massive value out of this. So thank you so much, Lynn, for being here. And I hope you enjoy your time in our podcast.
Thank you for having me on. And it's nice to be able to talk to everybody. All the best, guys.
So turn